All right, at this time, I'd like to call the City of Taft Planning Commission special meeting to order. Today is Wednesday, July 21st, 2021, and we're meeting at City Hall, Council Chambers, 209 East Kern Street, Taft, California, 93268. Effective June 22nd, 2021, Planning Commission meetings are held in person with full capacity seating and are also live streamed at https://www.youtube.com/user/City of Taft. Public comments can be made in person and can also be received per the following. Written comments may be dropped off in the drop box in front of City Hall. Comments may be emailed to the city clerk at ymayfield@cityoftaft.org, made by phone to the city clerk's office at 661-763-1222, and public comments not made in person will be accepted up until 1 hour before the meeting. And finally, any comments received will be read into the record. At this time, the regular meeting is hereby called to order. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Jerry, would you lead us?
Sure. Salute and pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's time for the invocation. Pastor Stephen McDaniel.
Father, we love you today. We're so grateful for all that you've done for our city, for our leaders. We just pray your blessing, your anointing, your covering, God, over our city, over our leaders. Help guide their thinking, their decisions. We pray that you would bless and continue to bless us financially and bless us, God, with good health in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Item number 1 is seating of newly appointed commissioners. Roll call?
Yeah.
Okay.
Commissioner Dowden.
Here.
Commissioner Johnson.
Here.
Commissioner Lycum.
Here.
Commissioner Livingston.
Here.
Commissioner Warren.
Here. Okay. Do we have some?
Can I have the three meet me up at the podium, please? I'm going to start with you first, alphabetical order. Can you raise your right hand and repeat after me? I state your name.
I, John Dowden,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear to affirm
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
upon which I am about to enter.
of what I am about to do.
Okay, congratulations. I'm happy you sign this. Oh, it's kind of upside down, right here. There you go. You can take a seat. Okay, Johnson. Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Kathleen Johnson,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
upon which I am about to enter.
upon which I am about to enter.
Okay. Oh, wrong one. Oh my goodness. Yep. Right here. It's just stating that we took your oath. Sorry. Okay. Congratulations. You're welcome. Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Jerry Livingston,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and
that I
allegiance
will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of
or
evasion,
purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
upon which I am about to enter.
upon which I am about to enter.
Yeah, right there. Congratulations.
That concludes that official business then, Darnell?
Yes.
Very good, thank you. All right. Welcome, John. Thank you. Mr. Dowden, Kathy, Mrs. Johnson, and welcome back. Sure. Okay, at this time, we will select a chairperson. There's a recommendation. Deputy Clerk, City Clerk?
I'll take the nominations for the chairperson.
Okay. Well, I'm going to nominate Ron.
Okay.
I also nominate Ron.
Okay.
That's ominous because
Yeah.
they know me and,
I'll nominate Ron.
well,
Might as
thank
well
you.
start, I'm going to move we take the vote.
Okay. So we'll do a roll call vote for that.
Okay, roll call.
Let me get my, Commissioner Dowden,
Here?
Yes.
Yes. Sorry, I'm new.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Lycum,
Yes for Ron.
Commissioner Livingston,
Yes.
Commissioner Oren.
Yes, I appreciate that. I think there is a time coming for change. And I think with two new members, we should maybe get our feet wet and get a little more grounded before we do changes, okay? The next item is the selection of a vice chair. And do you open those nominations also?
Well, now that you're chairperson again, you
Now
can,
that I'm chairperson, okay.
Run
So as the
those.
chair, I can go ahead and open the nominations for the vice chairperson's position. It's currently Jerry Livingston. I would recommend that we continue with Jerry, and I put forward his name.
I do also.
Yes for Jerry.
And I agree with that.
okay.
So-
I think we need a motion and a second on that too.
Okay, so it's been moved that we nominate Jerry. It's been seconded by
I second.
Yeah,
by
like,
Bob, and now we need a roll call vote.
Okay, Commissioner Dowden,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Lycan,
Yes.
Commissioner Livingston,
Yes.
Commissioner Oren.
Yes. That brings us to item 5, citizens request slash,
Not quite yet.
not quite yet.
There's a item 4.
Oh, excuse me. Reorganization of Planning Commission committee assignments.
So to make sure we knew who the chairperson was, we
Okay.
held this document off.
All right.
So you have the commissioner, prior assignments, and I highlighted, prior commissioners Miller and Banner, the committees they served on, so if, those that had prior committees, you can organize however you want to organize, but, those that want to stay with their committees, you can state as such, and then, the vacancies left by Commissioners Miller and Banner are the ones that could be filled by Commissioners Johnson and Dowden. So
Okay,
you could go one, each committee by each committee.
right. So the first one, the piece of paper here is divided up in sections, and the first one that we need to address is the Economic Development Ad Hoc Committee, which has 2 council members on it, and then an alternate, 2 planning commissioners, and then it has an alternate 3 from the community at large. That is, planning director Mark is our staff person on that committee who heads it up really. And the recording secretary is Darnell Porter. And the council members currently are Josh Bryant and Dave Knorr. And the alternate is Ed Whiting. The planning commissioners on that are Bob Lycum and Jerry Livingston, and the vacancies created by Susan Banner. The 3 at-large from community members are Renee Hill, Kathy Oren, and Les Clark III. So knowing that, we need to fill 1 position as for the alternate, or we can open up all 3 positions. If Bob or Jerry have something to say,
I'd like to stay on it. I've been on it from the start, and
I'd like to remain on it too, yeah.
okay?
we're
Now
just heading into the big stuff.
Then we need to have a alternate selected. Do you have an interest, Kathy?
I do.
Go
You
ahead.
do? Okay. John does, and you do?
No, that's okay.
Okay. So John's expressed an interest, and do we need an election, or is it just,
Or does the chairperson just appoint?
is it a
No,
yay,
it doesn't.
nay, or a roll call?
No, it doesn't need any of that.
Okay.
The roll call.
So that's going to be amended to have John Dowden. Correct?
Yes.
All right. Item, the next for our review is Traffic Commission Committee. City, the personnel that head that up are Craig Jones, the city manager, and the Public Works Director. And the recording secretary for that is Michelle Kincaid. The city council has 1 member, who is Ed Whiting, and it has 1 alternate, who is Jeff Eveland. It has 1 planning commissioner. Currently, that has been Shannon Miller. Then it has the police chief, Damon McMinn. A citizen participant is Don Black. Caltrans engineer is Nicholas Esquivel. And CHP representative is Adam Taylor. So what we're looking for is 1 person from the commission to fill Shannon's spot. Can we get a little background on what it looks like to be on that committee?
The one unique thing with this one compared to the economic development one, as far as when they typically schedule their meetings, this one does tend to be earlier in the afternoon. They do try to accommodate for all committee members, but from my knowledge, I think we've had occasional 10 a.m.s and even some, not too many, but it could be as early as 2 p.m. For this committee compared to the economic development one. It's usually been end of, the workday is like 3:30, 4 p.m.
Yeah.
But those that aren't able to take off time as early as about 2 p.m. in the afternoon for traffic committee, because of the somewhat working nature of it, having the different law enforcement members on that from CHP County and Taft PD. I think it tends to be slightly earlier in the afternoon, so,
May I ask a question?
yes,
Nick Esquivel,
yes.
he's been on there as the
He's a
Caltrans rep for
Caltrans
5,
employee
6, 7 years?
Out of Bakersfield, yes.
Okay, and part of what that committee has done in recent history, the last 2 or 3 years, can you give us a couple items so we know what kind of things that we'll be looking at?
One thing it tends to do, although they are separate, one, it would tackle some of the traffic improvements in town, so any road projects and things like that. There's been the occasional time where it will be back-to-back with the Public Safety Committee, because it does bring in public safety officers, so they could be there for both meetings if there's a interrelationship between the traffic aspect and if there's a public safety aspect to it. We haven't had one in a while because of COVID. Not sure.
All committees are basically obligated to meet twice a year. COVID has made it to where that's not happening as often, but per the city guidelines, it's twice a year and each committee is obligated to meet.
Okay, this particular committee was involved in the flashing light
speed
crosswalks on
signs.
Kern Street
Yeah.
and the designation of the safe past the schools. They worked, so it was a committee involved with Caltrans
Yeah.
and the city schools that got that done for us. And the other things they may look at would be like the improvement to, was that Supply Row that we did with grocery outlet?
They didn't look at that. I think the latest thing has been speed limit signs, the feedback signs, the crosswalk signs. We unfortunately had a traffic incident with pedestrians 2017, 2018, maybe 2019, probably misplacing the year. And there's, I think, been some incidences before that. I think before that they were trying to do some public outreach when school starts each year in August. So I think that's been entailed with that. Way back when, if you recall, coming into town from 119 or 166, there was never any mile signs that said you were 6, 7 miles away from Taft. That was a project way back in 2013, 14, getting some of those in place, and then some of the signs at the split at Harrison, taking Taft off of that sign because it's Ford City, and then Taft was more directing people further down 119 to turn on to Kern Street. So some little projects like that where if it, especially if it needs to involve Caltrans to get their input or reaction to, latest proposals on little changes in how people come on and off the highways into the city.
So in a nutshell, we can say it's not
You don't need to be
a committee per se, but it needs,
road
it's a
traffic
committee that,
technician,
that isn't the requirement, but it is a committee that does create changes. And
Yes.
you can impact the community positively,
Our
so.
public works director, city manager would be presenting the items, getting more of the expertise input from Caltrans, the county sheriff, our Taft PD, and you're very much the local resident, overhearing what the recommendations are and providing your input as a resident of Taft and how it impacts the residents of Taft. That's your input into that committee.
Okay, so what we're looking to do is appoint someone to that committee at this time. Do you have an interest in that?
I'm fine with that. My schedule is very flexible right now, so.
Okay. Do you have an interest in that, John?
She's
Bob?
more than welcome.
You?
No, I'm fine with when I'm on there, so.
Okay.
If-
Jerry?
No, I'm fine.
We're only
I've
looking for-
attended these, and I think this is an important aspect of what we, and not that anything is less important, but this has an impact that I think is pretty positive. So, I'm glad to see that you're interested in that, Kathy, so our designee will be Kathy Johnson. Okay? And we have ad hoc committees that are not standing. The Annexation Ad Hoc Committee is headed up from the city by Mark Staples here, and Darnell is the recording secretary. 2 council members currently on that are Orchel Cryer and Dave Norm. The alternate is Josh Bryant. And the planning commissioners that are on there have been Shannon and myself. And then Cal Resource Corp rep is Holly Arnold. And
So if you want
I
some
don't
background.
know what to tell you about the Annexation Committee.
It's been a while, most notably with Holly as the rep for CRC, because she took on the job with Hall Ambulance after that, probably within a year of us forming that committee. But we're still in contact with CRC, and when we had semi-regular meetings, they send a rep. So the Annexation Committee is, we were taking another look, 2015 to 2017, of the possibility of annexing the 3 county communities around us, or smaller portions of that, and what the procedures are, and the result of what that would be. And we haven't met in a while. We're probably due for just an update to see if there's any changes, and maybe get the LAFCO director out, the Local Agency Formation Commission, which is the agency that reviews all the requests to incorporate a new city or annex county areas into existing cities, or in the rare occasion if a city needs to dissolve and be absorbed back into the county unincorporated areas. So the city, the boundary of the city today took form over the last 80 years or so since the first addition to the city. But there hasn't been a lot of additions since. There's a number of laws that do have good intentions but do slow the frequency of adding neighborhoods to an existing incorporated city. So you would, I would be presenting the area of interest and what the procedures are to get those residents to engage with them, to gauge their interest if they even want to be part of Taft. And then I'd present to you what the resulting taxes that come from that, both from property and sales. And then we'd take direction from that committee, and which would be a recommendation to the council if we need to most likely get a consultant to take the lead on that, because it's very multifaceted and needing some better tax professionals on that beyond my knowledge to figure out what the true revenue stream is and how that benefits getting more city employees, police department, fire services, whatever it may be. This one would be slightly more in the later afternoon. I think we typically did 3:30, 4 p.m. Meetings. So anything later in the afternoon that accommodates your schedules is when we'd be hosting that.
One of the changes that has occurred legally, I could be wrong, but I remember that you're able to take in much smaller parcels or a selection of parcels in an annexation rather than trying to annex all of Ford City. There can be a desire amongst a row or a group, a geographical block of houses that would like to be in the city, and they can petition, and we can work with them. Is that?
That is one step, but the major change is just that we would need to take a broader poll of all of the adjacent communities that would be an area that could possibly annex in, and gauge their interest and show that to the LAFCO agency that does the processing of annexations, to show that we have checked other areas and they have said no or said yes, and we're actually putting one area as step one and the next one is step two, or it's the only area that has interest at this time. But we haven't done the formal poll because it requires some form of cost for the mailings to get the response, because we do have to do certified mail to elicit that response from the neighborhood, show those numbers to LAFCO. I can't tell you what turnout is needed and all that, but we'd have to start the committee back up again with getting the ground rules from the LAFCO director and their staff to guide us. And they're there to guide you through the process, but it's up to the city to head any annexation here unless there's a developer who's acquired a unincorporated area and they want to do it, then it's solely their process, but we'd guide them through it and do our local approvals, and then they have to go to LAFCO to change the boundary area to include them.
Mark, has that committee ever approached Les Clark Jr.? He affectionately refers to himself as either the mayor of Fort City or
Yes,
even
the
the
mayor of Fort
president of
City.
Fort
He's the
City,
mayor.
yeah.
We haven't gone too far just because, and it's nothing against the neighborhoods, but they're, well, I'll keep it short. The short answer is no, we haven't approached him. It's just when some of the basic metrics of the process, it's shown some roadblocks that unfortunately it's quickly slowed the process, although that's a contradiction there, quickly slowed.
That's,
Well, I've
but
been here
processing
35 years
that
now, and I
too.
can't figure out why the other unincorporated areas would not want to join the city of
That
Taft.
is one thing where we would need committee direction and council direction if they want to spend the money to at least get the polling done to gauge that interest and at least have that in writing and formalized. And that's one step we didn't get to back when the committee was a little more active. So that's what the two individuals currently, or if Chairman Warren wants to continue to serve, and then whoever else that would want to serve on, that's what they'd be tasked with in reviewing and then recommending to the council.
this committee is a little more tedious
Yes.
than the others. So, I mean, if you're looking for something to come to fruition shortly, this isn't it.
Correct.
It hasn't happened yet, so.
It's a little more-
I remember my mother-in-law talking about annexation soon after we got married, 40-plus years ago, and it didn't work then.
It's
But, you
kind
know,
of,
but now people are more receptive to it because they see that there are some advantages now. So it's in the eye of the beholder, and it's a tedious process. So,
I would think if we could get the president of Ford City behind it, maybe that would,
I'll definitely take that idea.
we have to corner
the
him
meeting.
eventually.
So,
I'm friends with some of his classmates, so maybe we can twist his arm. Okay, so on that committee, we have two people designated, as I said, Shannon and myself. I am willing to relinquish my position on that or remain. So if any of you have a desire to be on there, or more than one of you have a desire to be on there, you're free to speak up.
I have
We
the
need at least
desire, but
one.
I do not have the time.
Yeah, I can understand that.
I've always been a
Trying to
proponent
get
of
my
it.
toes wet and not take
Yeah.
on too
This,
much.
this is probably you think twice a year is our required meetings?
no, this one,
Ad hoc is as needed?
As needed
correct.
Okay,
until dissolved.
so it's a non-standing assignment, and in honesty, we haven't had a meeting in 18 months, 2 years?
Yeah, and that's definitely pandemic assisted
Sure.
on that. So because there's been such a void between the last meeting and now, I would definitely guarantee at least one meeting for update purposes between now and the next time the commissioner may reorganize the next seats that are up for reappointment. So sometime between now and the end of next year, once we get more back into having regular committee meetings and get out of this pandemic.
un-
So.
unless somebody specifically wants to, I'm willing to serve and do have the ability to make the meetings.
I heard John say that he feels he's, I don't want to speak for you. Are you interested, or would you prefer to?
If someone else is interested,
No, I'm just offering as a stopgap. I'm not saying
yeah, I'm afraid to take on too much. I'm trying to get my feet wet, but if need
That's
be,
that's
I'll do whatever
understandable.
the committee
Well,
needs.
can we leave that open while we discuss the next committee?
Well, sure. No fear with these committees. The staff will guide every committee member through the process.
Yeah, it's,
Not
they
looking
keep
for
us
experts.
from making mistakes, and if we ever slip a mistake past them, he vets on us like white on rice. I mean,
Yeah,
But we
and
It's
can
over.
definitely address the homeless one if you wanna go over that, and then,
you may be called at night.
also to be clear, you don't have to have the technical knowledge. I mean,
No.
it comes with sitting, like here on the planning commission. Over time, you gain knowledge of things that you might not have originally, but it's really the staff that carries the load when it comes to, especially this particular committee, because it is a complicated in terms of the legal issues and this tax issues. So it's not a bad committee to sit on. You're not really put in a position of having to overload yourself with extra reading or things like that. So for what it's worth, it's not a bad place to learn about stuff here.
My recollection is when you get there, the work has been done by staff, and we're there to affirm the work or ask pertinent questions and get clarification, as that's basically how it goes. Yeah, we haven't been misled by our staff at any point in my knowledge. So if you're interested,
And then let's do it. I'll take it.
okay. Then Shannon will be replaced by John Dowden.
John,
Okay.
do you live in the city or one of the?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
You have to be on the
Yeah, you
planning
have
commission.
to be on the commission, you have to reside in the city limit. Okay, so that's the annexation ad hoc, and we can share this and you can get the names of the other members that'll be with you. Okay, the last ad hoc committee we have, which is a non-standing committee again, it's the Homelessness Vagrancy Issues Ad Hoc Committee, and that is headed up by Police Chief Damon McMinn, and the recording secretary is Chris Carpenter. The two council members are Josh Bryant and Jeff Evelyn. Orchel Cryer is the alternate for that. The two planning commissioners have been Susan Banner and myself, and Bob has been the alternate, and the at-large members are Renee Hill and Lucille Holt. So, you want to give us a brief synopsis as to what the
yes, Chairman Orrin, as you know, it's local and statewide issue of concern with homelessness. Back when it was initiated, 2017, 2018, we were also partnered with representatives from the United Way in Bakersfield. And we were moving along well. The chief got things moving along where we were trying to, I believe, adopt some general homelessness policy standards of things to try to tackle it regionally, not just locally here in Taft. And then I believe it lost some steam when the rep from United Way departed from the company, and I don't believe there was an assigned person to replace that rep. And so I'm not sure where it stands at the moment, but it could be called at any time by the chief to address, you know, how things have come out from the pandemic and how things seem to be moving forward with locally our homelessness and anything he's aware of regionally in Kern County. So this is can be assigned at any time. A council member can call it a meeting, recommend down to the city manager or the police chief, hey, this, that, the other. So this doesn't require that regular meeting times per year. So it'd be more of be ready on call kind of committee. Because our last meeting was quite a few months before the pandemic hit, so I'm not sure truly where we stand, but we do need commissioners to be ready for this.
if I recall correctly, in that instance, we had impact from the state legislature that we had to go through and decipher how to apply the statutes to our local circumstance and what we wanted to accomplish.
And I think there's even more since the pandemic, so not to go too much into the weeds, but however the process moves forward, what's changed since in the 2 years since we last met. But I would leave that to the chief and how we move forward on that.
Okay. All right, so Bob, you and I are currently members of that committee. Would you like to remain on that committee?
Yeah.
Okay, as I would. And then we have a vacancy created by Susan, so we have an opening there. Is that something that interests you, Kathy?
I am interested in
Okay,
that.
I thought, I don't know, something in my gut told me that would be up your alley.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so,
Which
need
two are
to-
the primary and which one is the alternate?
okay, the two primary would be, now Kathy and myself, and Robert is Bob is the
I'll
alternate.
remain as an alternate.
Okay.
Okay, because this is, has the potential for shorter notice for meetings.
Yes.
Okay, and with Susan, with Kathy and me both being here in town most of the time, that's a good mix, I guess. Okay, so there we are. All set. I can return this to you, Mark, or the cheat sheet you gave me?
You can hang on to it. Our deputy clerk has jotted down all the assignments and.
Okay, and then I think John's interested in who he's going to be serving with. So if you want to put those names on your list, you're free to do that. Okay, excuse me, I think we've lost our place. We did,
You're on number 5.
oh yeah, we're on number 5 at this time. Okay, so citizens' requests / public comments. Comments are to be received as stated in the above policy. This is the time and place for the general public to address the commission on matters within its jurisdiction. State law prohibits the commission from addressing any issue not previously included in the agenda. Commission may receive comment and set the matter for a subsequent meeting. Please limit comments to 5 minutes. Have we anyone wishing to address us tonight or no? Okay, so there are none. We can dispense with that. Item 6 is the minutes from the June 2nd, 2021 regular meeting. And they're attached. And we have
3
Since
people.
we've
we have
retained
three
of the
that are here and we're there.
Yes.
Okay, so we can go ahead and move on that.
I move we adopt the minutes as written.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
None opposed? So that carries on to 3-0. Public hearing, zoning ordinance amendment number 2021-02. A recommendation for Mr. Staples.
All right, thank you, Chairman Orrin, and since we do have two newly seated planning commissioners, I will go through the complete staff report, but then just touch on the key items that are being changed regarding this. So, as you mentioned, this is zoning ordinance amendment number 2021-02. Between 2012 and 2014, the city received applications for 3 different wireless facilities approved by the Planning Commission. However, only one of those came to fruition and was constructed on the property on the north side of Main Street between 8th and 10th Streets. An application for a new facility disguised as a water tower was filed in August of 2019 and approved by the Planning Commission on June of 2020. Planning Director found that the regulations regarding wireless communication facilities needed an update from their original adoption date in 2008. Section 6-12-8-1 covers the application requirements and development standards for such facilities. The regulations are inconsistent and at times redundant regarding different zone districts, review processes, and standards regarding stealth and architecturally integrated designs. And part of that means some of the responses and back and forth I've had with the applicants have revealed some of these inconsistencies or tough to answer their questions based on what was given in the code. So back on January 20th, 2021, Planning Director presented a draft resolution with revisions to application procedures, allowable zone districts, height limitations, and text amendments. The commissioners at that time asked for additional clarification on the suggested amendments. One significant change was to move this item to its own section within Chapter 12 because it was tiered off from your regular antennas, the old like ham radio communications antennas, and now that cell towers are kind of their own entity separate from them, still FCC controlled, but it's uniqueness in how we review it compared to the others. It's gonna be in its own section, which is now 6-12-33. And the revisions to that new section taken from 612.8.1 is complete and ready for review and comment. And it is recommended that the Planning Commission adopt the attached resolution and recommend approval of the zoning ordinance amendment to the City Council. So what you have attached here are two versions of the resolution, which shows, the first one shows all the changes, so you can clearly see what's being scratched out and deleted from the different sections, subsections, excuse me, and then the underlined areas are the additions. And you'll see some of it's more for being more legible or readable, however you want to see the term. And then it's, as mentioned, it clarifies what would be a site plan review process, and something that's solely through our project assistance team meeting. That's the PAT that's in the resolution, or in the section for that application process. So that stays more in-house with the planning department. But anything that exceeds the height of the zone district, so the two facilities, one is the false pine tree that's behind West America Bank. That exceeds the 45-foot height limit of all structures in that zone, so that triggers this conditional use permit that comes before this planning commission to review it. And then what's soon to be a full water tower next to Fast Trip gas station, that again exceeded the height in that district. And that's the typical trigger that makes it something that's reviewed by the five of you. Things that are shorter than that, integrated into the architecture and you really would not see it, could be a more administrative process. But typically the types of facilities that the major cell companies are trying to build are trying to get singular, not the company, but singular with an S, poles or towers that can cover a broader range for a small town like Taft. So more often than not, it's gonna come before you as opposed to something that's in-house with the city. But we're providing that option if it ever evolves to that way where things could be more integrated into, maybe the Chase office building for some, the smaller cell 5G that the more urbanized areas of LA, San Francisco, New York are integrated into the office building architecture to provide the cell-less corridors of Fifth Avenue and places like that where buildings do get in the way of major towers that normally would cover 2 square miles of area with their signal are blocked by buildings. So an integrated type thing would be that more in-house process. And then everything else is just updated standards and requesting that we want more stealth facilities looking like something other than a generic tower, except probably out in industrial zones or out in the oil fields where everything is exposed metal as it is, so it'd fit within that. Don't need a random fake pine tree out in the middle of those areas. So providing those options and laying it out more is what we've done in amending this section of our code. So that's what's before you today, and then there's a completely clean section or copy of the same resolution, which is what will be adopted and recorded, and that's what moves on to the council for their review and approval based on your decision today. So I'll leave my presentation at that, and I'm available for any questions the commission may have.
I have a question. It's more a matter of wording than it is substance. But on page 3-6 of the resolution, the corrected resolution, item 3, B3.
Okay.
The applicant shall supply verification of compliance with the Federal Aviation Administration, particularly regarding, are we saying FAA regulations?
Okay, you're gonna have to guide me again.
Okay, the applicant is, it's on page 3-6, 3 of 6, pardon me.
Okay.
Section B3,
Capital B or lower B?
capital B.
Capital it'll be 3 is at the time of submittal, a site plan review.
And it would be number 3.
Oh, okay, sorry, 3 becoming 2. All right,
Yeah, I'm sorry. I couldn't tell which one was 3 crossed out or the 2 was.
okay.
My eyesight's not that great. So the applicant shall supply verification of compliance with the Federal Aviation Administration, particularly regarding height limitations. Are we talking about their regulations?
Yes, so there's a process they call height avoidance review.
Okay.
I'm getting the term completely wrong, I know. But what it is because we do have the Kern County Taft Airport here, there are limitations to heights around that area, and it extends some basic restrictions extend all the way to about the Verizon tower in that bank, because they had to go through 2 steps of a review through the FAA, where it seemed like one was more of a strict, only looking at what the paper says of mapping things out, and they had an initial response of you have to lower your 75-foot tower down to 30 some odd feet. But in the letter response, it says we can go through a more intensive review, which they did, and they go, okay, which is more of the details of how the airport operates. So since all the traffic is supposed to be eastward, there is no westward traffic. That once the FAA dug more into those specific details, which you think the first review would do, but it doesn't, then it was just the beacon light that's at the top.
So
And now it seems like with the AT&T project we just reviewed, it's just outside whatever the last.
That's
ring
the conical sphere that
Yes.
they use.
They did that, and it was their a response letter of there is no finding or limitation to your height or need for beacon or other height markers.
I guess what I was asking is, should we insert the word Federal Aviation Administration regulations, particularly regarding height limitations?
It reads the same both ways.
You know me, the lawyer, he likes to be more specific, so it's up to you.
I don't know what they would ask beyond the reviews they've done before, but they could.
Well, that's why I
So
said
maybe something on
regulations.
that.
If there's not a regulation for it, they shouldn't be reviewing it, right?
It's unlikely that they're gonna change their regulation with respect to this anytime in the foreseeable future, because they need that, as I recall,
Yeah.
it's a descending zone. So
Yes.
you, over this way, you can have taller stuff because it's 1,000 feet.
That's
But
correct.
once you get to where the property is across from the urgent care, you're no structures with a certain height.
That's the-
500 foot.
Right, that's the conical-
500,000, 2,000, 2,500 feet, something like that.
That's the conical sphere they're talking about. It's,
Right. And it's, so
height goes up as you go farther out.
the further away you get, the higher it can be.
Yeah, it's the predictive lowest path of
Right. And it's,
plane elevating from takeoff or coming down from landing.
I mean, I'll leave it to you, but I just feel like if you're identifying the regulations, it's,
Just
FAA regulations as opposed to just what the FAA asks.
Yeah, it's what they ask and what I've done, because there was a prior AT&T submittal, which was what I was referencing of the applications from a number of years ago. There was Verizon, AT&T, and Metro PCS all within a year or two of each other, and the only one that ended up proceeding through the entire process was Verizon, which is the tree behind West America. And each time it came, I think Metro PCS was step 1, so their letters from FAA always provided a copy to each of the successive applicants.
Right.
And they contacted the same office, which I believe is out of San Diego, and they go through their steps.
Jeez.
Because instead of constantly editing this for whatever federal code section, FAA
Okay.
regulation section, it's more of, we provide the most recent review letter, and it's contact this individual at the office and find out the process. And usually they know this because the consultants that process these do things statewide, not just Bakersfield oriented or Kern
Right.
County. They're probably doing things from Fresno down to
San
LA.
Diego.
So they usually go through this, but we do make sure we condition the projects with this requirement, and we've repeated that with each of these over the years. But yes, good catch.
Okay. So, at this time, we're looking for a motion to,
Let's formally go through the public hearing.
oh,
Just in case.
okay. Anybody from the public want to speak?
We've received no phone calls or
No
other
phone
writings.
calls, comments, emails, any of that. Are there any questions from commission members?
No.
Okay. It was a thorough explanation and good to refresh my memory at least, so thank you. So now we can close the public hearing,
Yes.
and we can now have a motion.
A motion?
So,
Well,
The way we
let's,
normally do it, I'm going to go ahead and make the motion so you can see how we normally do it.
All right.
you
Okay?
have to read a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're on item 7, right?
Yes.
So a motion to adopt a resolution entitled "A Resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Taft Recommending Approval to the City Council of Zoning Ordinance Amendment Number 2021-02 and an amendment of Section 6-12-H-1 of Title 8 of the Taft Municipal Code regarding wireless telecommunications facilities."
Question. You said Title 8 is what I heard, and it should be Title 6.
Title 6.
612-8-1.
Yeah,
And then of Title 6.
of Title 6.
Yeah, of Title 6, I said that.
All right. So it's been moved. Do we have a second?
Second, as amended stated.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. We don't need roll call. All those in favor?
No roll call.
We do need roll call,
Yeah.
okay? All right, so our votes?
Vice Chair Livingston,
Yes.
Commissioner Lycum,
Yes.
Commissioner Dowden,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Chairman Oren.
Yes. Okay. That moves us to item 8, Planning Commission Review. Brief update on planning and zoning law and CEQA regulations. Again, Mr. Staples.
Thank you, Chairman Oren. Provide me a second here to bring this up for you. As you recall, in prior years, or every 2 years or so, since 3 of you have served for more than one term, I've taken the opportunity when we reseat incumbents or get new commissioners to do a brief update on planning and zoning law, just to make sure we're all on the same page with different planning terms. We won't be getting into any new case law and something significant comes out. So I've provided a copy of these 2 items in the planning commissioner handbooks for our 2 new commissioners. And I will be putting together updated books for our 3 longer term commissioners with these in it. And they're good reference materials, and just getting the terminology in your head with, planning has its own set of terms and items that it reviews. So this PowerPoint presentation is one that was put on by the California League of Cities. They have a Planning Commissioners Academy back in March of this year, and they have a Planning Commission 101, nuts and bolts of planning. And sometimes it's always good to go back to some of the basics and just go through what it is we do as planning commissioners, as a planning department. So these were the panelists that gave this presentation for the league. PlaceWorks is a pretty large consulting firm in the state. They've helped us with some GIS work in the past. It looks like a city manager with City of Livermore, which is up in the Bay Area, and then a planning commissioner from San Diego.
Bill Anderson was the director of planning for the city of San Diego, too. So
And
he was there.
As general as the name Bill Anderson is, I'm not sure if that's our former APA, American Planning Association president, Bill Anderson.
It
who's
very
also a
easily
consultant.
could be, because he was very involved in it.
So some of the topics they went over is all the things that are the basic tenets of planning and what planning commissions review, regulating land use, general plan, zoning, CEQA. I'm going to go over a separate CEQA presentation, and then the role of the planning commission. So where did this all come from? Regulating land use. It arose from good government. One of the main things that it's the last bullet point here is that it really came from as cities evolved and grew, got bigger, building heights got taller, and then particularly the East Coast where you have a lot more moisture with humidity, and then they were realizing there was a relationship between light and air. So how the sun tracks and how a building casts shade, and if there's certain buildings that never see the light of day, that was really, what you could take from all three of these, that's what it went over, or was the main purpose for it, and then establishing this local government police power for the health, safety, and welfare. And that's everything from the decisions councils make down to planning commissions to what committees review, is ensuring health, safety, welfare of the public, of the public they oversee with their regulations, and then the actual actions of that agency. These are points that this presentation wanted to make about the key milestones at the early stages of quote-unquote zoning. Personally, when I went through school and all of that, the main items are actually the second and fourth here. They call it the New York imposes first comprehensive zoning ordinance. The way I understood it, it was actually more of a building code that over the years became a zoning code, but that was the health, light, and air. It started understanding when the first skyscrapers were building in the early 1900s. It was casting shadows, or the smaller buildings behind it were having flu issues, 1916, the 1918 flu 2 years later. And then, so they were solving that with all the new building would have to have some relationship to height, light, enough windows for airflow, because there wasn't HVAC systems back then. So they started measuring that and seeing the impact of all that. Now when it comes to actual zoning, the last one here, which is the town of Euclid in Ohio, which is just northeast up the lake side, if you will, from Cleveland. They went out of their way to take a piece of land owned by Ambler that was pretty large, and with Cleveland and Ohio being the Rust Belt, industrial boom was just rampant. And there was a vacant piece of land owned by Ambler, and the way I recall it and understand it, the town starting to see the effects of industrial and smoke and air and noise and the other impacts that come with it. There's the benefit of producing the steel, but then there's the impact on the neighborhood around it. They actually took the singular property and kind of checkerboarded it up with a mix of uses: industrial, residential, industrial, residential. And it was a little more haphazard than what we do today, but it went through the entire process to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court upheld the town's ability to ensure that public health, safety, and welfare by setting those separate zones or uses that are allowed. Now, it's completely evolved since then, and probably the action that they did, I don't know how much it would uphold today, just because it was somewhat haphazard, but today we study it more, there's more rationales, and enough thousands of court cases since that have shaped zoning to what it is today. But that's the main one, is Euclid v. Ambler, is what every planning lawyer and planner knows. That's kind of day one for zoning. Now, specific to California, they passed their laws requiring cities and counties having master plans, which eventually became general plans. 1928 had the Standard City Planning Enabling Act, and then the zoning and planning laws have changed faster here than any other part of the country, and with even some states kind of mimicking what we do, but they have stuck to their terms and haven't really fully adopted what we have adopted with regards to plans and housing elements and the like. Land use regulation today, though it's been in the state law for a while, really just specifies the general plans and specific plans. General plans, every city is required to have one, but there isn't a specific requirement for how often they're updated. The housing element within it used to be an every 5-year update. Now we're on an every 8-year update. So we'll actually be starting work on that sometime next year, when the state gives Kern County its expectation of housing growth from 2024 onward. because our current plan covers till the end of 2023 of anticipated development and what programs and changes we need to make and which have been made. Keep this moving. This is just a graphic to show how things tier down from the general plan. You get more specific as you go downward on this graphic with specific plans, taking the general tenets of the general plan, the policies and actions from there. The specific plan provides some specifics for a specific area of land. It's interesting they put in coastal plans. That's actually more of the coastal commission where proposals go through the local agency based on their local regulations. But they already know what the coastal regulations are, but they have to go to a separate review also with the coastal commission to get their approvals. And then zoning is very specific about property size, dimensions, setbacks, heights, things like that. And then design guidelines are more detailed, but that's some of the subjective things of color, architecture, and the like. And then the bottom squares are the various processes to achieve all of the specific regulations above that. General plans, again, required by state law. It's quote unquote the constitution for planning and development of the jurisdiction, but also conservation of it as there's open space and larger areas, particularly like a county, needs to outline the conservation of areas such as the mountainous areas of Lake Isabel and all that may be state parks, national parks, and the like. The long range vision is 20 to 30 years, but there are still cities out there probably going on 40 years with their general plans, but there aren't many. Again, as we went through the steps, it's the basis for local land use decisions. Granted, we use more of the zoning codes and specific plans that are on file. But at the general plan level, we want to identify the important community issues. That's one thing we're going to do with the downtown specific plan that's coming up, because it acts like a mini general plan. So we'll be identifying the downtown issues of concern there. And it mentions wanting community participation, but enough other legislation and just cities in general, and we should be doing it anyways without legislation telling us, is to get the feedback from the community of what they're wanting, the community participation and what drives the general plan, specific plan. And even though we didn't have attendance here for the zoning change we did just a minute ago, we encourage that as well, not just for general plans. So the general plan has elements. It began with just the top 7, with land use, housing, and circulation being the main 3. What can you do with your land, specific to the housing production in your area, and then circulation is your roadways. Then the next 4 are the, in a way, the gaps in between. Conservation of space, preserving some open space for recreation, whether it's organized or passive. And then noise and safety cover impacts that those other 5 can produce. Road noise, the activity on a particular land use. Industrial tends to be the one that produces some noise or safety concerns. The bottom 2 have only been added on the past couple years, which is air quality, which was always reviewed through the EIR for the other 5 elements. But they want a specific element that talks about greenhouse gas emissions and the like. And then the air quality born the environmental justice side, where certain areas of the state and particularly urbanized areas where the combination of noise, safety, air quality, and then some economic concerns identify environmental justice areas or disadvantaged communities they refer to. And the state does a lot of the aggregating of that information that at least gives us some idea of where some of those areas may be, where they have extreme air quality concerns, noise and other nuisance issues, and other economic concerns, and that needs to be addressed in it. We don't have to add those 2. We don't have air quality or environmental justice yet until we go to update the general plan again, and we just completed that process prior to 2017, and a lot of those were mandated 2018 and onward. So when we go to amend any of these, we'll have to address those two elements then. I won't go over the additional general plan topics. These have come out of cities who have voluntarily wanted sustainability, environment, economy elements. Healthy communities has been a popular one for over 10 years now, where it takes from some of the other elements but focuses on generating a healthy community. This is generally the general plan content. Pretty much everyone has the overall vision, established goals that accomplish that vision, and then specific objectives or tasks, policies, actions, and indicators to achieve that vision as well. So this is what a typical general plan land use plan looks like, color coded for the residential areas, commercial areas. Your yellows and oranges tend to be your residential, your various colors of red are commercial, and then purples and grays are your industrial. And then it also will outline your major transportation corridors and streets. But they'll do a simplified plan that outlines the circulation map, and it's mostly the larger thoroughfares. So around here, it's your 119s, 33s, 10th, 6th Street. Part of the reason why we have our parade down there for Oil Dorado, it's a pretty wide boulevard, but it connects even outside the city from Ford City to South Taft. So you outline that as well, provides the street section standards of how far apart the curbs are, the lanes of travel, and then whether or not there's on-street parking. As I mentioned, the housing element used to be a every 5-year update requirement on it. Now it's 8 because it actually takes so long for housing and community development to review over 400 cities and over 50 counties worth of elements over an 8-year period, which gives us more time to try to accomplish one element period before we get to the next one. It also, like I said, gives them time to review them all and be detailed in those reviews. So we work with them. The key thing here is this RHNA, otherwise pronounced as RHNA, Regional Housing Needs Assessment. We'll be getting that, which is the total number of units they anticipate that we would need based on housing demand over the 8-year period, which the next one will be from 2025 to 2033, 24 to 32, apologize. And that comes from the Kern Council of Governments. So if you've heard of them, Mayor Pro Tem Cryer sits on that board, and the state relays to them and relays to all the cities in Kern County what our number is for that next 8-year period. Right now, the one we're in from 2015 to 2023, our number is 250 some odd units, and we're in the upper 60s to 70 units constructed between the Sandy Creek Estates, the Amber Street homes down off of Front Street, and there actually was a couple homes over on Pilgrim and Sunset that were an older tract that filled in back in 2015. That's contributed to that nearly 70 unit development over the past 5 years. So we'll get a new number in a year or so, and we'll need to work on our updated element then. I won't go into the housing element law. We'll actually be touching on these SB 35, 330 in the downtown specific plan and the zoning code update we're going to do. SB 2 is the major funding that's allowing us to do the downtown plan, and then AB 101 was additional funding that's going to be the LEAP zoning change that we're going to be working on with the downtown plan. Won't go over this. That's the lump sum of monies. SB 2 provided $160,000 in grant money to prepare the downtown plan. And then AB 101, which is the LEAP grant, as you can see there, that's not as accurate. I don't know why they were so off on this, but less than 60,000. There was actually more tiers on LEAP, and we got 60,000 on ours. It was actually under, I want to say 25,000. Population got the $60,000, and then it leapt up to, I don't even think the 125, 250, or 5 are accurate either, but we combined the 160 and the 65,000, and we have 225,000 total between the two grants. And that's what we'll be getting into soon, and I'll bring up more detail on that in the director report. We'll pass on that. And then now zoning. I think most of you, even before becoming commissioners, are familiar with zoning. It details the building uses, size, landscaping requirements, the specific requirements for proportion of signs to the building, how many parking spaces you need, and then other performance standards. Well, here's the link between what that Ambler v. Euclid and how zoning came about. That's why they call it Euclidean zoning. It's from Euclid, Ohio. That's where the term comes from, if you ever hear that. And it's more of just that it's very specific. It's got to be 10 feet from a property line, 5 feet from a property line. It all started with that Euclid case. Form-based zoning is just a way where they do away with a lot of the measurement side of it, and it's more, we want homes to look like that, or if it's gonna be 2-story, it starts setting back a certain amount. And we don't have that in ours, so I won't go too much into detail on that. CEQA, I'll go over this more in the next presentation, so we'll pass that for now. We'll pass that. So on the role of the Planning Commission, it's not really a creation of plans and regulations. It's you're the initial decision maker. You're the right hand of the City Council, and you make recommendations to them. As you saw, our zoning ordinance amendment today was a recommendation for them to approve. You are doing the main review on it, and they do tend to accept your decisions here, but the creation pretty much comes from the council down to staff, and then the projects and processes come through the Planning Commission before it goes back to council for final approval. But it does involve the plans and regulation amendments, and then implementation through project review. And that was the end of their presentation there. Now I'll dive right into CEQA just to get through this. So some CEQA basics. You saw some basic bullet points on the prior presentation. So CEQA's history, enacted in 1970. As you see on the third item here, it's modeled after the national EPA, which was formed just before that through the Nixon administration. And here in 1970 was when Ronald Reagan was our governor. I think they're trying to mention this case as an early CEQA case that really helped define the process of things, but there's actually even a case before CEQA was even day one, July. I think I brought it up in a presentation years ago. LAFCO, one of the first LAFCO processes in 1970. The decision was made before CEQA went into effect, but it still got sued based on the fact that they knew CEQA was coming, and they thought it was trying to avoid a CEQA process at the time, and that came forward. But they say important amendments at these years. There's court decisions every year that
Yeah, there's anywhere from 6 to 8 that are,
major, that don't necessarily rewrite the statute or the guidelines, but provide direction of this wasn't done or this was done wrong. So all that, so amended all the time by legislature, courts, and local jurisdictions.
the reason that Friends of Mammoth is considered so important is because when CEQA was passed, most people thought it covered government projects.
Oh, that was
Friends of Mammoth is the one that said, no, it covers everybody,
okay.
even though, who knows?
And that's what the LAFCO process was as well. You know,
Right.
it's a government process for annexing, so. So it's still in the regulations, but the point of CEQA is to inform the environmental impacts and to solve the environmental impacts if possible. It identifies them. Unfortunately, it has somewhat evolved where most people think it absolutely has to 100% solve an environmental concern, and that is not the case, but many people could make the case otherwise. It's the information document. So these are all the terms. You'll have the copy of this, so we won't go through all of this. So CEQA evaluates change, which is from the existing condition to the new project. Raw land, 75-foot cell tower. What are the short and long-term impacts? Usually what that means is short is during the construction period, which is all the dust kicking up and noisiness of the construction process, and then the long-term impact is the use of that property, building, site, whatever it may be. Direct and indirect changes or impacts, or cumulative impacts over time, and then based on local and regional plans. So this goes over the players, which is the applicant of the project, staff processing the environmental document. The public is the one that is informed of the environmental impacts. The lead agency makes the decision. Consultant could be for staff or the applicant. Responsible agency is anybody outside of, in our case, the city, that may have a concern or need to review and comment. And then you, as the planning commission, make the decision on the environmental determination as well as the project itself. So you can pretty much X out discretionary project. It all starts with a project. The CEQA law all talks about whether or not something is a project, which means the whole of the action. So it's not just the one element of maybe it makes a lot of noise. You need to look at everything. What does it generate a lot of traffic on the road nearby if it gets built, and things like that. So once you have the project, you determine whether it's exempt from CEQA. The negative declaration or mitigated negative declaration is maybe you do only have one or two possible significant impacts. You get studies for that. You go through the public review process and approve it that way. And the environmental impact report is if you have some numerous ones, but more particularly, you'll have ones that you could probably determine ahead of time that you may not be able to resolve that 100% or to everybody's satisfaction. So, yeah, the CEQA guidelines can be somewhat gray, unclear. You get disoriented or bewildered through the process of what you're trying to accomplish and resolve. But one of the exemptions, which isn't really in the list of exemptions, but the 15061, we have B3 that we utilize for a lot of our zone changes because it isn't project specific. It's setting up the guidelines in the zoning code, so it ends up being exempt. So how the determinations are made, informing the community, are there precedents for prior projects that were similarly approved or denied, understanding of all the impacts involved, relying on the expertise through the technical studies, traffic engineers, biologists, cultural resource analysts who look at historical properties or structures, and then is there any known public controversy that may be involved with the project. And you're managing the risk of all that. So weighing the cost and benefit of proceeding with the project, the higher protection of an environmental concern comes at a cost. Decisions aren't always black and white or obvious. And then the deciding factor is a fair argument and the substantial evidence provided by those experts in those studies. These are three terms. We won't go into too much until we get into some more discretionary projects, but ministerial is everything from your building permits and more administrative reviews that don't come before you or the city council. Discretionary, we do have some level of discretion on the staff level, but discretionary and mixed projects are going to come to you and or the city council. I'm not going to go into fair argument standard, that's getting into the legal side of it, but it's when you're getting into some gray area of whether or not it's determined you're mitigating an impact. And the document will make a fair argument for, because of this, we're going to do that to mitigate it or just lessen the impact caused by it. And then substantial evidence through that narrative as well in both the negative declaration or EIR documents. You need to outline the substantial evidence, either referencing the general plan or the studies or the whatever's presented by the applicant, to present that evidence that despite all these things, it may cause an impact, but is still approvable based on our general plan and zoning and other in the mitigations proposed. That's all the substantial evidence that you would make your decision off of. And we won't go into the nuance of it, but these are the things that I have to review. Environmental planners have to make as part of the overall process, and we try to provide you the summary of all this in the presentation of the project when it's coming to your decision. And then, again, these are more of the details. With exemptions, there's the two specified lists, they're statutory and categorical. Statutory is unique things established by legislation. Categorical is certain types of uses or projects. And then we won't go into the nuances of environmental impact reports. Those are all essentially pronouns to the report. Is it a subsequent, supplement, master, program, or project EIR? And then the addendums are if you tier off of a already approved environmental impact report, but you're doing something supplemental to that, you can do an addendum where it covers the necessary questions and elements and impacts that are in addition to what's already been studied and mitigated. And the exemptions, the list was there before, but these are just the specific sections in the state law regarding statutory and categorical. Negative or mitigated negative declaration, there's hardly ever a strictly negative declaration, which is essentially saying we reviewed everything, but we're not placing any mitigations on the project. But the negative declaration, which means you're declaring there is no impact on it because certain items have been mitigated, but it doesn't, it's not at a level where it requires the environmental impact report review. And this is the shorter process. It could have a similar number of expert reports with the project discussing the environmental impacts, but the environmental impact report does have a lengthier review time mandated in the state law, where there's both a initial 30-day review, and then once you have everything resolved and you're ready to go to a public hearing, that's the 45-day review, and that's assembling all the public comments during that period. If you notice, there is a public noticing that we do, like we did for zoning. That's 10-day. That could be 10. The negative deck is 20, and this is 45. The context is everything in an environmental review. We all have different standards. You can adopt local standards for different thresholds of traffic and air and different things like that. But you also have to do the expense and probably regular expense of updating those every so often. So it's more of going with the ebb and flow of the state and what changes there are to air quality levels based on the local air districts, the size of projects. There might be large projects that are okayed that don't need to go extensive reviewed, and then there may be small projects that do have to be reviewed. So how do we know is just keeping aware of how things change year to year with the state. Thresholds of significance are outlined in the state code, and then as I mentioned, local jurisdictions can establish some local thresholds to measure or compare a particular project to. We won't go through that. So the mitigation measures, there is gray area. It's avoiding, minimizing, rectifying is more solving. Reducing is just reducing. Eliminating is a final, has some finality to it. And then compensating, where there could be more of a fee involved. A lot of that tends to be on the state level. When they start getting involved with Caltrans, you're giving them money to eventually put a traffic signal in. Fish and Game wants money to conserve a piece of land somewhere else, things like that. But mitigation measures, everything could be avoiding, or it could be just minimizing. You know there's going to be some impact, but grocery outlet really isn't going to put that many more cars onto Supply Row. It's going to be more, but we have stop signs that control traffic when it hits 6th or 10th. That's the existing mitigation. It's sufficient for the project. So this is kind of the pyramid of going from avoiding down to reducing, managing, and the like. Let's see, that's details into how you describe the project though. So public comments, it's more intensive in the EIR process, but every step of a project needs to make public comments available either through that noticing period, whether it's 10 or 45 days, or in the public hearing when the decision's made. Not just embrace, but get to know what the passion or the direction is of the city, even beyond the five of you, the five of the council. Even though the 10 of you are residents just as well as any other resident, but when we start getting some public input on things, we need to really look into whether their comments are something that needs to be addressed. And these are just some nuances of not all those that are in favor show up and not all that oppose actually comment on it. And unfortunately, there's a bit of a hurrying up process at the end, because some of these processes could be real lengthy, real time consuming. You're trying to get to that final point. But on my end, we need to take our time in making sure we hit our public noticing dates and provide following all the process steps. So I think most planners have gotten good the last 10 years or so about there aren't late comments or document dumps. We did a little bit with the initial appeal on that grocery outlet. They appealed like the last day. It took a couple meetings to get the next one, but that's a little different. But it's best not to rush through some things if you know there's going to be some comments or a response to it. And then let us guide you, whether it's CEQA related or even the project as well. So you made the decision on those to delay, hearing the appeal, to get all the comment, to get the applicant to talk to the person considering appealing the project. They discussed out of the chambers, came back, and we still processed the appeal process on that, and it went its course. And same thing with any kind of environmental review or other project that may need an extra meeting or two to get through all the questions and concerns. The Verizon cell tower, we had a lot of the downtown individuals here who were concerned it would stick out like a sore thumb in downtown, and I think it worked itself out well, especially with their comments. So CEQA was not done until the project's approved, which is more back to all that public comment and addressing that if it is applicable to the project. And then you, the planning commissioners, are the last set of eyes before the decision is made, unless it's something you're needing to pass up to the council for their final review and approval. Just in general, give staff time a heads up if you have a question. Just in general, you can catch me at any time, call me about certain projects, or if you have a question about property in town and things like that. I think we're in better shape here, where I think the communication channels are far more open. I've worked in bigger cities and other areas where there's a little more of a barrier there, if you will. So, but feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. And then some of these are missed, some of these could be true. ERRs don't stop the project, but there can be elements of it. So if you've heard in some of the studies for us on the biology side, if we get that blunt-nosed leopard lizard, that can be a death to a project, because it's a protected class of species on the state level that if it exists, they don't want development happening there, and there's really not much of a way to negotiate on that. But in other instances, just because there's an EIR, it doesn't stop the project. It just takes a longer time to further explain the project and its impacts to get to the final approval at a planning commission or city council. It doesn't tell you how to vote, it just addresses the particular impact that it discusses in the document. When it says EIR, it's a myth that it would be more expensive. That goes back to what I said, where the same amount of study, the only way it is near each other is the same amount of studies could be either in the negative declaration or the EIR, so you're spending that, or the applicant spending that money for the expert studies on biology, transportation, and the like. But more often it is, just because of, there's probably more impacts to review and studies to put together to address those. EIR, it's, the only way it doesn't take longer is if there's no appeals on the EIR. If there's appeals on a negative declaration for whatever studies were done there and conclusions made, that's how a project with that would go longer. And EIRs will be more thorough. Well, the intent is it will be more thorough, so these myths are a little murky, but they're trying to dispel some of those. But the biggest thing is EIRs are not bulletproof, because there's still a lot of subjectivity. A local jurisdiction saying, okay, there's these impacts, but the benefit of the project outweighs that, and that's where you start getting into the area where there may be a challenge in your future with a project with an EIR. CEQA isn't perfect, is not an advocate for the project for or against. It's not the project itself, although many will use that as the determining factor, more so over the project itself. It isn't meant to fix existing problems, it's meant to address the changes, again, at the beginning. The change from existing condition to proposed. And it's not always an analysis of worst case, but when you actually get to analysis, you want to address worst case, what the largest traffic load may be and all that. And in decision maker, it's an element of your decision. Because there could be more of a design element to a project that ends up being what encourages you to deny it. So, and we'll go over all this when we get down to projects that have that. Again, I won't totally go over this. Again, CEQA evaluates the project that changes the existing environment. On a staff end, we need to circulate for public review, identify the thresholds related to the project, and then we need to consider the changes before any action can be taken. Some detail items where for planners, environmental planners get involved with. There's been a change. This first item here is how you review traffic studies. It used to be about levels of service, which was the actual number of vehicles traveling through a roadway or being stopped at an intersection. Now the state's going towards more vehicle miles traveled, and that's relating to the environmental impact of an individual vehicle, truck, whatever it may be. So when we have a project that has that, I'll go over vehicle miles traveled versus level of service. The lack of discretionary approval, we'll hit on this a little bit with the downtown specific plan. The state, oddly enough, as regulated as California is, they're trying to break down some regulations when it comes to being able to build more housing. Objective standards, that's more dealing with if you're gonna establish design standards, being more objective than subjective, what shade of gray or green kind of stuff. More infill requirements, which is, exactly how it sounds, a vacant lot in the middle of a block, how to avoid running something through a more complicated environmental process, increased use of addendums, use older environmental reports to tier off of, and then more emphasis on planning, less on CEQA, which sounds contradictory to how the state operates with environmental reviews. So, I don't know if I'd go to Wikipedia other than maybe going over some of the history of CEQA, but the rest of the other two sites I would only go for the middle one, which is Office of Planning and Research, which is an office below the governor's office. The CEQA portal is still tough to use. It's more for planning staff when we actually assemble the environmental documents and the studies. We upload to the state so they can distribute to the state agencies. We don't do that walk in the document part of it. So OPR is a place to go for both general plan guidelines and CEQA guidelines. Somewhat better summarized, but it's still quite lengthy reading. So that's it for my presentations. I know I went longer than I was hoping. I was hoping to make it a summary, but whenever you get into this stuff, it's arduous and detailed. But feel free to ask any questions of me now or after the meeting or when we start getting into the meat of more projects again coming out of the pandemic. I'll definitely address the impacts of projects and how we move forward and improve these things. The downtown specific plan and that zoning ordinance amendment will go through more more of an environmental process. It won't be an EIR, but we'll be going over that as well, so you'll be able to take this very general overview and apply it to that when we get there by June of next year with those projects, so. That's it for my presentation. I'll open it to any questions you may have, otherwise we can.
Thank you, Mark. Have any questions?
No.
No.
Thanks, Mark. Once again, pretty thorough.
Yeah, I tried to not turn you into planning students or encourage you into planning and zoning law or sequel law. It's quite arduous.
In a nutshell, what happens, all this stuff comes to Mark and he will make sure that they're following the rules.
Also, all this on projects.
It's all on Mark.
Yes.
All right, that moves us to item 9, which is Planning Commission review, discussion of the consideration of changing meeting time for Planning Commission meetings. We have had the 4 o'clock meeting time for the past 3 years as an accommodation to one of the members who is no longer on the commission. So if you folks are agreeable, it's been suggested that we move the Planning Commission meeting time to 5 or 6 p.m.
Yeah, staff is pushing more for 5 just because, somewhat related to the pandemic, we're a little short-staffed. If for any reason our clerks are unavailable to staff this, I no longer have a recording secretary, which is typically an assistant through the planning and building department. So we're just trying to avoid, this meeting's gone a little long, shifting too many schedules on the staff side of things, or avoiding any kind of overtime potential.
That was going to be my question. Are we causing overtime, or there's comp time that is given for
It
these
would be
instances?
overtime, and then the third unofficial reason is just since we're the first Wednesday of the month, that can conflict with those that participate in industry night. It's an outside force. It's not anything we should be deciding on, but that is one thing. But one thing I will recommend is, unfortunately, Kern Cog has scheduled a public meeting for our next meeting on August 4th. And they chose the time of 5 to 6 p.m. on that Wednesday. I told them more than once that, hey, you need to avoid that because of our planning commission meeting, because I'd like for the 5 of you to participate. So I believe in here, whatever time you decide on, I would recommend, unfortunately I can't find the time. I apologize, that the effective date for whatever time you select, that it be effective, whatever our meeting date is in September, just so we could start at 4 on August 4th, and hopefully be done by 5, and then those that want to participate as residents of Taft in the Kern Cog transportation. I wish I had the thing in front of me, but I apologize with that.
Is that a face-to-face meeting, or is that
I believe it's face-to-face.
Okay.
I wish I had the details for you, but there is, they schedule at the same time as our planning commission time, so.
Is it here in town?
I believe it is. Apologize
At
for not being
the-
as prepared for that for you.
At the transportation center, perhaps?
Apologize. I don't think anybody's here that can answer that question either. I have to keep it general since I don't have the flyer in front of me, but I would just recommend whatever time you choose, it's effective the September meeting.
Okay, so if we adhere to we said August 4th
August
is our
4th,
next
let's
scheduled
stay-
meeting.
Keep it at 4 p.m. and then whatever time you decide on.
Okay,
starting
I
in
think
September.
that's wise to not change things now for next month. Let's go ahead and plan that would occur. We can finalize that next month on the
Yes.
4th. On August 4th, we can have that on the agenda. We can approve or disapprove.
Correct.
It seems fine with me.
In the meantime, it gives you a chance to think over what the impact for you is. Okay?
And you could, the five of you could still have a discussion of whether you are okay with the 5 PM or if there's some preference for 6. If you want to discuss that now, or unless you want to just brought back for final decision.
You want
on
to think
August 4th.
about that, Bob? You're the one that has the most travel.
4 o'clock is the earliest I can make it.
A
So
5
5 would be fine?
for you,
Sure, but
and it would help city staff in their planning. So is 5
5
o'clock?
o'clock's fine with me.
I'm perfectly fine.
It's fine with me.
I was the one who suggested we stop the 4 o'clock meetings.
Yes.
So, yeah, I would be in favor of a 5 PM meeting time
Okay.
also.
I'll bring this back for final decision on August 4th, and with implementation starting, looks like our meeting's gonna be on September 8th for that
Okay.
following subsequent meeting, starting at 5 PM.
Our meetings have to be the Wednesday after the first Tuesday
Council meeting.
council meeting.
And it makes efficient use of our city attorney's time, who
Right.
is here.
Who is absent, by the way?
Not
For some reason,
normally.
I'll fill in for his statement.
No, that's okay. We'll call him up. Okay.
He was
Good
absent last
enough.
night, too.
So that concludes item 9. Planning Director report is item number 10. Mark, do you have more to tell us?
Just 2 quick things that are related to each other. It's both related to the downtown specific plan I mentioned a minute ago. The consultant that's on board with us, they were part of a sit and sip presentation this morning. It was a good discussion with those that were in attendance. I believe they post the sit and sips on their Facebook page, so if you want to go back and listen to the discussion and questions asked, I highly recommend it. Just so you can at least put a name to the face of Mimi Morisaki and Brooke Peterson with Rick Engineering Company, who are our
Okay.
main contacts for the project. And we are aiming for our first workshop on the project in August. I believe we are aiming for August 12th. No time or date yet. We'll be publicizing that every which way we can through the chamber, on our websites, and in the driller, if we're able to do so in sufficient time to get everybody notified on it. That will be mostly digital. It's even more of an introduction into the project and soliciting feedback from the folks here in Taft. I have provided them with a number of contacts of the stakeholders in town from, the special districts like Les Clark at the Rec District and their involvement in the city, and the 5 of you, the city council. So they're wanting as much participation as we could get, just so that the project isn't solely an assumption by them and
Right.
working with me. So definitely attend that. They seem to really have a good footing on what's going on here. They're not new to this process, but they seem really excited with the initial response they've received so far, and are really raring to go with that first workshop meeting on the 12th.
And that's the 12th of
August.
August.
Which is a Thursday. It's not a meeting week, and that's one thing that helps there. It doesn't make it 3 days in a row of council, commission, and that, and it doesn't seem like anything else is scheduled for that day.
I
We don't have a time.
I have surgery on the 9th. I am not sure I'll make the
So
12th.
one thing we are planning to do, if you noticed in the RFP that went out, and I've been working with the consultant, there will be, we have a section on the city website right now where documents can be placed, but probably by the time we get to a second workshop, everything is part of the process, from flyers to notices to PowerPoints, whatever it may be, will be on a third-party website to review later. So I'm confident what gets recorded in workshop 1, probably through a Zoom type call, will be put on that
Oh,
site for
if it's
further
a Zoom,
review.
that's not a problem. If it's,
And even if there's maybe some sort of polling during that meeting, a little question and answer, yes and no, what do you like, don't like kind of stuff, we'll definitely put it on that third-party website to collect additional responses for folks who aren't able to make that specific meeting. This isn't gonna be about who can make it and who can't, and we only listen to those who can, so it's gonna be a very open process to get as much input from everybody. There'll be plenty of blank fill in additional comments, and we encourage that, even if it's especially if it's something that's not covered, you know. And I don't feel it's inappropriate to, they talk all about housing on a workshop, but you're concerned about small businesses or whatever it may be, provide us that input and it'll help guide them that the next workshop, or if it's a public hearing, we'll definitely address it at that point. We're gonna make the materials as reviewable and accessible and online, offline, every which way you need access to it, we'll make it happen. So we're aiming for August 12th on the first one to get the meat of the information, and come back for a second workshop in the fall to present initial findings and direction of the specific plan and the various changes to the zoning code, primarily to help encourage more home building. But the downtown specific plan is definitely going to be a comprehensive that will include all things commercial, mixed use, and other items that need to be reviewed down there.
And did you set a time for that? Did I miss that?
Not yet. That's,
Okay.
it probably will be early evening, 5 p.m., 5:30, 6. In that, compared with what we were discussing a minute ago, they're my extended staff now, so it's me working with them to, that's going to be digital, but future ones will be in person, probably at the transit center.
Okay.
But expect a digital workshop for the first one.
All right.
And that's all I have for the
That you
report.
have, okay. City attorney statements?
He has
Any of us,
Mr.
any of
Chairman,
us
he
can
relayed
parrot
no
it. Go
statement
ahead.
to me.
Yeah, he relayed no statement.
No comments at this time, I'm sure.
No, sir.
Okay. And commissioner comments, questions that you may have, or something you'd like to say, community event you're aware of?
Welcome aboard to our 2 new members.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Anything else? We received invitations to participate in the El Dorado festivities, so that was nice of Shannon to include us. That's about it, I guess. All right. What we need now is a motion to adjourn.
No.
Item 13 first.
Oh, 13, I'm sorry.
You just got so used to me doing
Yeah,
it that you
it's,
don't even think about it, right?
Would either of you, Kathy or John, like to attend the city council meeting and explain what we did in this meeting?
And if you're comfortable with that, that's fine.
If you do want to do that, Jerry will let you, as will we. But typically Jerry's been the person doing this.
I attend the meetings regularly anyway,
He's a
so.
very regular attendee.
Maybe I'll go and watch you do it.
He's done very well, though.
Yeah. Okay. So then by unanimous decision, we elected you
Okay.
without a vote.
Yeah, and I don't like hold on to it, so at some point, if you decide you'd like to just get up there and do the presentation in the future,
Yeah.
that's perfectly fine.
What you should do is just go contradict everything he says so there's.
Or you could always just come up and sit behind me and go.
No, that ain't right. Okay, now a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Moved and a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? It carries on a 5-0. We are adjourned.
That one's always unanimous.